We don't spend a lot of time on titles, but titles are actually the most read part of any book or essay. Think about it. How many times have you been looking through a blog online, the library at school, a set of things that you need to read for this class, and what you've done is just browse the titles, deciding what you're going to look at and what you're going to pass over. Titles matter, as does your first paragraph. That title, that first paragraph following the title is going to be the most read part, because if you lose your reader there, they're going to put it away. But if you can hook them, you're on your first step to acing an essay. Your book has a whole list of suggestions for writing a good lead-in, because the lead-in and the thesis are what make up your introductory paragraph. So how do you hook your reader and move meaningfully towards the purpose or the argument of your essay? All of their different suggestions, from paradox or intriguing statement to a shocking statistic or a recognized authority, and then going on to things like a personal experience. All of these things have a little bit of shock value or a deep meaning because they're coming from you personally. They're poignant, they're surprising, perhaps even frightening. Something that is evoking emotion or relating to a hot topic in an interesting or perhaps unthought of way is a great way to create a lead-in. So go through these different lead-ins and think, is there one that would work particularly for you? Now, make sure your lead-in introduces and lands on your thesis, because you can come up with an interesting story, a personal experience that then is a right turn or a left hook away from your thesis, and your reader feels disjointed and doesn't understand how that experience led to this thesis. So making sure these things go together is one of the most important things after you have hooked the reader. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And avoid apologies or complaints. You can make an argument that critiques things, but you want to do it in such a way that it doesn't come off as simply venting. Instead, it's seen as critique with purpose, perhaps beginning with a story that makes us invested in the thing that you're critiquing, so that we, like you, want to see this changed. And finally, stay clear of generalizations or overused lead-ins. That's why your books suggest doing things like going to your own personal experience or a relevant quote or a arresting statistic. Those are unique and attention-grabbing, and avoid the cliches. When you get to your ending or conclusion, you do want to give major points or overall message of your paper, but you don't simply want to restate your introduction and your thesis. That is a beginning move. You're moving on to a deeper kind of conclusion, which should either anchor the importance of this essay or perhaps point towards future action. So having read this comparison and contrast of different pie crust to make, now why don't you go ahead and make your own, so that conclusion emphasizes the argument you made and then leads to action, leads to some further momentum, which is the goal of the essay that you were writing. And as you are pushing towards something new, say, hey, act on this, try it yourself, you don't want to introduce new points or irrelevant material. So that's that balance between pushing for action based on what you've said and beginning a new argument can be a little bit blurry and hard to determine. Also, make sure that you don't change your stance. It's okay to have a complex stance where you're saying this is better in 3 out of 4 situations, but in a quarter of situations, this is also the other one is the better option. That is a complex and realistic stance to take. But you don't want to reverse it or change it and say, well, I guess they're 50-50 in the conclusion, if what you've been arguing is it's really sort of 75-15. And finally, avoid angering your reader. This can be hard if the comparison and contrast that you've made is something that you're passionate about. But in a professional essay writing community, thinking about that reader and getting the effect you want, which is not simply telling someone off or putting someone down, but convincing them of something, provoking some sort of action that's meaningful and positive, that takes finesse, and it takes an awareness of how your audience is reacting to what you're saying.